Beloved one, can you sense it in this quiet moment? There's something sacred stirring in the atmosphere around you. A tender invitation that speaks without words, moves without sound, and declares truth that your soul has been desperately longing to hear. It whispers through the morning light that filters through your window, calls through the silence between your heartbeats, and proclaims with divine authority, you are exactly where you're meant to be. This isn't coincidence bringing you to these words. This isn't random timing or casual encounter. This isn't the universe throwing you a bone or fate offering empty comfort. You've been drawn here by divine orchestration, pulled by the same infinite love that spoke galaxies into existence and knows every star by name. That same immeasurable care has been tracking your journey, watching your struggles, noting every tear, and waiting for this precise moment to remind you of something you may have forgotten in the deafening noise of recent seasons. You belong here. Not in some distant future when you've figured everything out, when all the pieces fall into place, when you finally feel worthy or ready or equipped. Not when you've healed completely from every wound, or achieved the goals that feel impossibly far away, or proven yourself valuable beyond question. Right here, right now, in this very moment, with all your questions and uncertainties, your weariness and confusion, your beautiful imperfections and unfinished business, you belong. The breath moving through your lungs as you read these words isn't accidental. It's intentional, purposeful, sacred. Each inhale is a divine gift, each exhale a whispered prayer. You are alive on purpose, positioned with cosmic precision, loved beyond human comprehension. The divine hasn't forgotten you in the shuffle of 7 billion other souls, hasn't moved on to someone more impressive or less complicated, hasn't decided you're too much trouble or too little impact. You remain the focus of infinite affection, the subject of unwavering attention, the beloved child who brings joy simply by existing. There's something stirring in the spiritual realm concerning your life right now. Can you feel it? It's subtle at first, like the faintest breeze before dawn, like the first notes of a symphony warming up, like the gentle stirring of hope in a heart that has learned to guard itself against disappointment. Something is shifting, turning. The time of wondering if you still matter is ending. The chapter of feeling invisible, overlooked, or forgotten is being written to a conclusion that will surprise you with its beauty. Perhaps you remember when it started. That subtle shift when rooms that once felt warm with welcome suddenly seemed indifferent to your presence. When your voice, which once carried weight in conversations and influenced decisions, began to feel like an echo in empty chambers. When invitations stopped coming with their former frequency. When phone calls became scarce. When the spotlight that once found you seemed to have moved on to illuminate someone else's stage. It wasn't dramatic, was it? There was no confrontation, no harsh words, no obvious rejection. It was simply quiet, a slow fading, like sunset colors bleeding from the sky, so gradually that you barely noticed until suddenly everything was cast in shades of gray. The warmth didn't disappear all at once. It leaked away drop by drop, degree by degree, until one day you realized you were standing in a space that felt foreign, despite its familiarity. You didn't speak about it much, did you? You learned to carry that particular ache in silence, to smile when asked how you were doing, to say fine when your heart was anything but. You watched others step into roles you once held, saw new faces rise to positions of influence you once occupied, observed the world continuing to turn without seeming to notice your gradual withdrawal from its center. The meetings continued without your input. The decisions were made without your voice. The projects moved forward without your involvement, and slowly, insidiously, you began to wonder if perhaps your contribution had been less significant than you'd thought, if your absence was less noticeable than you'd feared, if your presence had mattered less than you'd believed. You found yourself adjusting, didn't you? Becoming smaller in spirit, taking up less space in conversations, offering less of your authentic self because you weren't sure if anyone truly wanted the fullness of who you are. You learned to moderate your enthusiasm, temper your opinions, dilute your passion until what remained was a pale shadow of the vibrant person you once were. Something sacred cracked during those transitions. Not just your feelings that would have been manageable with time and healing. What cracked was deeper, more foundational. Your sense of significance, your confidence in your own voice, your trust that you had something valuable to contribute to the ongoing conversation of life and faith and purpose. You began to wonder if perhaps your season had passed, if your moment in the sun was over, if you were now meant to fade gracefully into the background while others took center stage. You started questioning whether the dreams you'd carried were realistic, whether the calling you'd felt was authentic, whether the gifts you'd been developing were actually needed or wanted. The questions multiplied in the quiet moments. Am I still relevant? Do I still have something to offer? Has the world moved on without me? Am I holding on to something that's already over? And with each unanswered question, with each day that passed without confirmation or encouragement, the doubt grew stronger and the voice of your true identity grew fainter. But here's what you need to know with absolute unwavering certainty. That quiet withdrawal was not a divine instruction. That slow diminishing was not heaven's plan for your life. That growing sense of invisibility was not a reflection of your true value or your actual position in the cosmic story being written across the fabric of eternity. The anatomy of spiritual attack. There's a particular kind of spiritual warfare that doesn't announce itself with dramatic battles or obvious opposition. It's subtle, patient, strategic, far more dangerous than the loud accusations you would immediately recognize and reject. This kind of attack works through whispered suggestions that sound remarkably like your own voice, your own thoughts, your own logical conclusions drawn from disappointing circumstances. The enemy of your soul is far too cunning to attack you with blatant lies about God's love or obvious falsehoods about your worth. He knows you would reject such transparent deception. Instead, he plants quiet suggestions that masquerade as wisdom, humility, even spiritual maturity. Maybe your best years are behind you. Perhaps you've already made your most significant contribution. Others seem to be doing what you used to do, but better. Maybe it's time to step aside and let the next generation lead. You're probably not as needed as you once thought. The world has changed, and you haven't kept up. These whispers come wrapped in what appears to be mature reflection, realistic assessment, appropriate humility. They seem reasonable, logical, even biblically sound to a heart that has been bruised by rejection or confused by changing circumstances. But beneath their respectable exterior, the strategy is brilliant in its subtlety. Instead of frontal assault, it's death by 1,000 small cuts. Instead of dramatic lies, It's truth twisted just enough to become deception. Instead of obvious opposition, it's the gentle erosion of confidence until you voluntarily withdraw from the battlefield. He whispers about relevance because he knows you were created for impact. He suggests obsolescence because he understands you were designed for purpose that transcends generational trends. He promotes invisibility because he recognizes the light you carry has the power to illuminate entire atmospheres when you walk in full confidence of who you are. The goal isn't to destroy you outright. That would be too obvious, too dramatic, too likely to provoke divine intervention. The goal is to neutralize you, to convince you to bend yourself, to persuade you to step aside voluntarily. If he can make you believe that your time is over, that your voice doesn't matter, that your presence isn't needed, then he accomplishes his purpose without ever having to directly oppose you. But his strategy has been exposed. His subtle campaign to diminish your sense of belonging has been uncovered and brought into the light. And in this moment, divine truth is breaking through the fog of his deception with crystal clarity. You are not forgotten, not replaceable, not finished, not irrelevant, not unnecessary. The season of hidden preparation, what you've interpreted as being set aside, has actually been a season of sacred preparation. What felt like rejection was actually divine protection. What appeared to be abandonment was actually intentional hiddenness. Not because you were being punished, but because you were being prepared for something requiring deeper roots than visible fruit could provide. This principle runs throughout the entire tapestry of spiritual history. Consider the greatest figures who have shaped the course of human destiny. Moses spent 40 years in obscurity tending sheep before he ever lifted a staff or confronted Pharaoh. David spent years in anonymity, forgotten by his own family, long before anyone knew his name or recognized his anointing. Paul disappeared into Arabia for years after his dramatic encounter with Christ, processing and integrating his revolutionary experience before he ever preached a sermon or planted a church. Mary lived in a forgotten town called Nazareth, carrying a world-changing promise that no one could see, wrestling with an announcement that must have seemed impossible. In each case, the hiddenness wasn't punishment, it was preparation. The invisibility wasn't abandonment, it was incubation. The quiet seasons weren't evidence of divine disfavor. They were the sacred spaces where the deepest work happens, where character is refined in the furnace of obscurity, where roots grow deep enough to support the weight of future fruitfulness that would crush a less compared foundation. You've been in the secret place, the hidden chamber, where God does his most transformative work. While the world saw silence, heaven saw formation. While others perceived inactivity, the divine was orchestrating internal revolution. While you felt forgotten, you were actually being remembered into wholeness, piece by piece, breath by breath, prayer by prayer. The work that's been happening in you during these quiet months or years cannot be rushed, cannot be duplicated, cannot be achieved through public ministry or visible service. It required solitude for deep soul searching, stillness for internal listening, and the kind of profound processing that only happens when external noise is reduced and internal receptivity is amplified. You haven't been wasting time. You've been composting pain into wisdom, transforming wounds into compassion, converting disappointment into depth, metamorphosing confusion into clarity. You've been developing the kind of internal stability that doesn't shake when circumstances shift, the kind of rooted strength that remains steady when storms come, the kind of quiet confidence that doesn't need external validation to know its worth. During this season, you've learned things about yourself that you could never have discovered in the spotlight. You've developed muscles of faith that only grow in the gymnasium of uncertainty. You've acquired knowledge about God's character that only comes through walking with Him when you can't see the path clearly. The pruning that felt like punishment was actually preparation for greater fruitfulness. The stripping away that felt like loss was actually clearing space for new growth. The emptying that felt like abandonment was actually making room for a fresh filling of purpose, passion, and divine empowerment. The sacred identity beyond performance. Here's a truth that may revolutionize how you see yourself and transform how you navigate relationships, ministry, and life itself. Your identity was never meant to be built on what you do. It was established before you ever performed, achieved, contributed, or succeeded at anything. Your worth was declared before your first breath, sealed before your first moment of usefulness to others. This flies in the face of everything our performance-driven culture teaches about value and significance. From the earliest moments of childhood, we're subtly and not so subtly trained to believe that love must be earned, approval must be won, acceptance must be achieved through good behavior, impressive accomplishments, or useful contributions. But divine love operates by entirely different principles. When the Heavenly Father looked at His Son after baptism and declared, "This is my beloved, in whom I am well pleased," Jesus hadn't performed a single miracle. He hadn't preached a sermon that changed lives, healed the sick, or walked on water. He hadn't fed the 5,000, raised the dead, or died for the sins of the world. He hadn't done anything yet that would qualify as ministry or measurable impact by human standards. And yet the declaration was complete, final, unqualified, unconditional, beloved, pleasing, precious, cherished. The pleasure wasn't based on performance, it was rooted in relationship. The love wasn't conditional on achievement, it was grounded in identity. The acceptance wasn't dependent on usefulness, it was founded on belonging. That same declaration echoes over you right now, not because of your resume, not because of your spiritual achievements, not because of how many people you've helped or how many prayers you've prayed or how faithfully you've served in various capacities. You are beloved simply because you exist. You are pleasing simply because you're His. You are precious simply because you were chosen before time began, before the foundations of the earth were laid, before the first star was hung in the cosmos. This kind of love challenges every assumption our fallen world makes about worth and value. It defies the cultural narrative that says significance must be earned through achievement, relevance must be maintained through productivity, and love must be deserved through perfect behavior. It stands as a radical alternative to the exhausting cycle of proving, achieving, and striving that leaves so many souls depleted, discouraged, and desperately empty despite their external success. Understanding this truth doesn't make you lazy or complacent. It makes you free. Free to serve from overflow rather than obligation. Free to love without keeping score. Free to rest without guilt. Free to say no without shame. Free to be authentic without fear of rejection. You don't have to earn your place at the table. You don't have to justify your existence with productivity. You don't have to prove your worthiness with perfect behavior or impressive accomplishments. Your seat was reserved before you were born. Your name was written in the book of life before you ever learned to write your own name. Your place was prepared before you ever wondered if you belonged. The restoration of true strength. You've carried so much for so long, haven't you? Not just the obvious burdens of responsibility and obligation, but the invisible weight of others' expectations. The crushing pressure to be consistently strong. The exhausting demand to always be the one others lean on, without anyone asking what support you might need in return. Somewhere along the way, you became the reliable one, the steady one, the one who never complained or asked for help. You wore those labels with a mixture of pride and weariness, grateful to be needed but secretly aching under the weight of always being the supporter and never the supported, always the giver and rarely the receiver, always the strong one and never the one allowed to be vulnerable. You learned to carry your pain in silence, to solve your problems in isolation, to bear your burdens without complaint. You became skilled at deflecting concern, at changing the subject when conversations turned toward your own needs, at maintaining a facade of having it all together, even when you were falling apart inside. But strength was never meant to be a performance you maintain or a role you play. True strength was always meant to be a gift you receive, a grace you access, a divine empowerment that flows through surrendered weakness rather than independent capability. Biblical strength doesn't flow from your capacity to handle everything on your own. It emerges from your willingness to stay connected to the source of all power, all wisdom, all sustaining grace. It's not about your ability to be impressive. It's about your availability to be used. It's not about your capacity to carry the world. It's about your wisdom to let the one who actually sustains the universe do the heavy lifting, while you focus on faithful obedience to whatever He asks of you. The divine isn't looking for people who can carry the world on their shoulders. That position is already filled. He's looking for people who know they can't, and who are humble enough to let Him be their strength, moment by moment, breath by breath, step by step. He's not impressed by your ability to keep it all together. He's moved by your willingness to fall apart in His presence and let Him piece you back together with threads of grace, mercy, and divine love. This is why your season of breaking wasn't a failure or a sign of weakness. It was preparation for a different kind of strength, the kind that acknowledges limitation without shame, embraces dependence without embarrassment, and finds supernatural sustenance in divine connection rather than personal determination. You're not weak because you can't do it all anymore. You're wise because you've learned the difference between human effort and divine empowerment. You're not failing because you need help. You're finally understanding how strength actually works in the kingdom of heaven, where power is made perfect in weakness and grace is sufficient for every need. The rhythm of divine rest. One of the most radical acts of faith in our hyperactive, productivity-obsessed world is the decision to rest. Not just sleep when you're exhausted, but true rest. The kind that acknowledges your humanity, honors your limitations, and trusts that the world won't fall apart if you step back from trying to hold it all together. You've been afraid to rest, haven't you? You've confused busyness with faithfulness, productivity with obedience, constant availability with love, and relentless activity with spiritual maturity. You've believed the lie that your worth is tied to your output, that your value is measured by your productivity, that your significance is demonstrated through your inability to say no to any request or need. But the divine wove rest into the very fabric of creation, not because he was tired after 6 days of world-making, but because he wanted to model for you what wholeness looks like. He wanted to demonstrate that being is just as important as doing, that presence is just as valuable as productivity, that stopping is just as sacred as starting. Rest is not laziness, it's obedience to divine design. Sabbath is not selfishness, it's worship, an acknowledgement that you're not God and don't have to carry responsibilities that were never meant for your shoulders. Taking time to breathe, to be still, to simply exist without producing or achieving or solving or supporting. This isn't a luxury you can't afford. It's a necessity you can't afford to ignore if you want to remain healthy, whole, and authentically connected to the source of all life and energy. Your body has been trying to tell you something for months, maybe years. The headaches, the tension in your shoulders, the exhaustion that sleep doesn't cure, the anxiety that won't quiet, the emotional numbness that has replaced what used to be vibrant feelings. These aren't just random symptoms to be medicated or ignored. They're signals from a system that's been pushed beyond its design limits. Cries for help from a soul that needs space to breathe and room to heal. Your spirit has been sending signals too. The prayers that feel dry, the worship that feels forced, the Bible reading that feels mechanical, the ministry that feels heavy rather than life-giving. These aren't signs of spiritual failure. They're indicators that you need rest, restoration, and the kind of unhurried time with God that allows your soul to remember why you fell in love with Him in the first place. You have permission to say no. You have permission to disappoint people rather than disappoint your own soul. You have permission to choose presence over pressure, being over doing, connection over productivity, rest over rush. You have permission to trust that God is bigger than your limitations and more capable than your capacity. This isn't about becoming irresponsible or uncommitted. This is about becoming sustainable, whole, and authentically aligned with the rhythm of grace rather than the pace of anxiety, the flow of divine love rather than the frenzy of human expectation, the sacred art of boundaries. Love without boundaries isn't actually love. It's enabling, codependency, and ultimately destructive to both the giver and receiver. Generosity without limits isn't actually generous. It's self-destructive and teaches others to be takers rather than givers. Availability without restrictions isn't actually helpful. It's unhealthy and unsustainable. You've confused your gentleness with weakness, your kindness with an inability to say no, your compassion with an obligation to absorb everyone else's pain and solve everyone else's problems. You've believed that being loving means being available to everyone all the time, that being kind means never disappointing anyone, that being compassionate means carrying burdens that were never meant for your shoulders. Because true love sometimes requires disappointing people. Real kindness sometimes means refusing requests that would be harmful to grant. Genuine compassion sometimes demands that you stop rescuing others from consequences they need to experience in order to grow, learn, and develop their own strength and wisdom. You were never meant to be an emotional holding tank for everyone else's struggles. You weren't designed to carry the weight of others' choices, absorb the impact of their pain, or take responsibility for their happiness, success, or spiritual growth. You can care deeply without drowning in others' problems. You can love fiercely without losing yourself in the process. Setting boundaries isn't about becoming cold, uncaring, or selfish. It's about becoming sustainably loving, genuinely helpful, and authentically present rather than frantically available. It's about offering your best self rather than your exhausted self, your overflow rather than your dregs, your strength rather than your depletion. When you learn to honor your own needs, you actually become more capable of meeting others' needs from a place of abundance rather than scarcity. When you stop saying yes to everything, your yes becomes more meaningful, more powerful, more life-giving. When you protect your energy and time, you have more to give when you choose to give it. Healthy boundaries aren't walls that keep love out. They're gates that allow love to flow freely while protecting what's precious and preserving what's sacred. They're not about controlling others. They're about taking responsibility for yourself, your choices, your energy, and your availability. The return of authentic voice. Your voice matters. Not the version of your voice that you've carefully edited to be more palatable, more acceptable, more likely to avoid conflict or controversy. Your real voice. The one that carries your unique perspective, your hard-won wisdom, your authentic experience of life and faith and love and loss. You've been quiet for so long, not because you had nothing to say, but because you weren't sure anyone wanted to hear it. You've held back your thoughts, your insights, your questions, your observations, because past experiences taught you that your voice might create tension, might be too much for others to handle, might not be welcome in certain circles or conversations. You've learned to moderate your enthusiasm, temper your opinions, soften your convictions, and dilute your passion, until what emerged was a pale shadow of the vibrant voice God gave you. You've become skilled at saying what others want to hear rather than what you actually think, at offering acceptable perspectives rather than authentic ones, at being agreeable rather than truthful. But the world needs what you carry. Not a watered-down, carefully edited, focus group-trusted version of your perspective, but the full-strength truth that comes from your particular journey, your specific encounters with grace, your unique wrestling matches with faith and doubt, and hope and disappointment. There are conversations happening right now that need your input. There are rooms that need your presence. There are hearts that need to hear exactly what you have to say, the way only you can say it, with the particular inflection and emphasis and passion that comes from your distinctive experience of walking with God through specific circumstances that no one else has navigated in quite the same way. Your voice isn't too much, it's exactly enough. Your perspective isn't irrelevant, it's essential. Your words aren't just noise adding to the cultural chaos. They're precisely what someone needs to hear to take their next step forward, to find hope in their darkest moment, to discover courage for their most difficult decision. The enemy has been working overtime to silence your voice because he knows the power it carries when it's aligned with truth and motivated by love. He's whispered lies about your relevance, your significance, your right to speak into situations and seasons. He's convinced you that others are more qualified, more articulate, more worthy of being heard. But God has been waiting for you to remember that He gave you your voice for a reason. He's been preparing platforms, arranging conversations, and positioning people who need to hear exactly what you have to offer. Your voice is part of His plan. Your perspective is part of His purpose. Your words are part of His answer to the prayers being lifted up by desperate hearts seeking hope, direction, and encouragement. The gift of spiritual sensitivity. You feel things deeply, don't you? You sense undercurrents that others miss. Pick up on spiritual atmospheres that seem invisible to those around you. Notice emotional tensions that others either don't perceive or choose to ignore. You're aware of unspoken needs, hidden pain, and subtle shifts in relational dynamics that escape the attention of more surface-level observers. Sometimes this sensitivity has felt like a burden, making you more vulnerable to others' pain, more affected by negative environments, more easily overwhelmed by the intensity of life in a broken world. You've wondered if you're too sensitive, too emotional, too affected by things that don't seem to bother other people. You've tried to develop thicker skin, to become less affected by the pain and chaos around you, to build walls that would protect you from absorbing everyone else's emotional state. You've sometimes envied those who seem to move through life without being deeply impacted by the suffering they encounter or the spiritual battles being waged in invisible realms. But this sensitivity isn't a flaw to be fixed or a weakness to be overcome. It's a gift to be honored, developed, and used wisely for the benefit of others and the advancement of God's kingdom. It's part of how you're wired, to recognize divine movement, to discern spiritual climates, to offer precisely what's needed in any given moment. Your ability to feel deeply is what makes you effective in prayer. When you intercede for others, you're not just going through religious motions, you're entering into their pain, their need, their desperation, and offering it up to the throne of grace with an understanding that comes from genuine empathy and compassion. Your capacity to sense what others can't perceive is what makes you valuable in ministry, counseling, and relationships. You notice when someone is struggling, even when they're putting on a brave face. You recognize when there's more to a story than what's being said. You sense when spiritual warfare is intensifying, or when God is moving in ways that aren't yet visible to natural observation. Your tendency to be moved by things that don't affect others is what makes you a conduit for divine compassion. God feels deeply about the pain and brokenness in His world, and He uses sensitive hearts like yours to carry His burden for hurting people. To weep with those who weep. The goal isn't to become less sensitive. It's to learn how to manage your sensitivity wisely, how to distinguish between what's yours to carry and what belongs to someone else, how to be present to pain without being destroyed by it, how to feel deeply without drowning in the depths of emotion. The emergence of new authority. Something is shifting in the spiritual realm concerning your life. Can you sense it? There's a stirring, a movement, a divine repositioning that's taking place behind the scenes. The season of preparation is transitioning into a season of activation. What was hidden is beginning to emerge. What was dormant is starting to stir. What was questioned is being confirmed. You're stepping into a different kind of authority. Not the loud, demanding kind that insists on recognition or forces its way into rooms and conversations. This is the quiet, confident kind that doesn't need to prove itself because it knows its source. It's the authority that comes from having been tested in the furnace of obscurity and not being destroyed, from having walked through darkness and emerged with light intact, from having been broken and allowing God to put you back together stronger than before. This authority carries the unmistakable scent of authenticity. It speaks from experience rather than theory, from brokenness that's been healed rather than strength that's never been challenged, from wisdom that's been purchased with tears rather than knowledge that's been acquired from books. It leads through service rather than domination, through love rather than fear, through invitation rather than demand. It influences through character rather than charisma, through consistency rather than manipulation, through humble confidence rather than arrogant presumption. People will sense something different about you now. Not something flashy or dramatic, but something settled, rooted, real. They'll feel safer in your presence, more honest in your company, more hopeful after spending time with you. They'll sense that you've been somewhere and learned something that they need to know. This authority doesn't come from position or title. It flows from the deep work God has done in you during the hidden seasons. It's earned through faithfulness in small things, proven through perseverance in difficult circumstances, developed through trust in impossible situations. You won't need to announce this authority or demand recognition of it. It will be evident in how you carry yourself, how you speak, how you respond to pressure and conflict. It will be demonstrated through your peace in chaos, your hope in darkness, your love in difficult relationships, the divine timing of restoration. Everything is happening at exactly the right time. Your season of hiddenness lasted precisely as long as it needed to. Your time of questioning served its purpose perfectly. Your period of feeling forgotten was actually divinely orchestrated for your ultimate good and His ultimate glory. You're not behind schedule. You're not too late. You haven't missed your window of opportunity or lost your chance for significance. Divine timing doesn't follow human calendars or cultural expectations. It moves according to what your soul needs for optimal preparation and maximum impact, according to what the world needs for divine intervention, according to what the kingdom needs for advancement. The delays you experienced weren't detours, they were preparations that couldn't be rushed. The closed doors weren't rejections, they were protections from opportunities that would have come too early and done more harm than good. The silence you endured wasn't abandonment, it was incubation, the sacred space where new life was being formed in secret. Every prayer that seemed unanswered was actually being answered in ways you couldn't see. Every door that remained closed was keeping you from paths that would have led to dead ends. Every delay was actually perfect timing from an eternal perspective that sees the end from the beginning. Now the timing is shifting. Doors that were sealed are beginning to creak open. Voices that were silent are starting to call your name. Opportunities that seemed impossible are becoming possible. Resources that were withheld are being released. Relationships that were dormant are being awakened. God has been working behind the scenes, arranging circumstances, preparing hearts, positioning people, and orchestrating events that will converge to create opportunities perfectly suited for who you've become through the process of preparation, walking in renewed purpose. Your purpose was never lost. It was being refined, deepened, matured, and expanded. Your calling was never revoked. It was being clarified, purified, and aligned with the person you're becoming rather than the person you used to be. Your significance was never diminished. It was being redirected toward something more substantial, more sustainable, more aligned with your authentic self. This next season won't look like your last season. It won't require you to become who you used to be or to recreate what you once accomplished. It's calling forth the new version of you, the one who has been forged in hiddenness, strengthened through struggle, and prepared through process for something that couldn't have been entrusted to the less mature version of yourself. You don't need to return to old methods or previous patterns. You don't need to recreate former successes or duplicate past achievements. You're being invited into something fresh, something that perfectly fits the person you are now rather than the person you were then. Your purpose is evolving, expanding, deepening. What began as service motivated by duty is becoming ministry motivated by love. What started as obligation is transforming into opportunity. What felt like burden is becoming blessing. What seemed like work is becoming worship. The gifts that were dormant during the season of preparation are being awakened. The abilities that were set aside during the time of healing are being restored. The passions that were buried under disappointment are being resurrected. The dreams that seemed dead are being breathed on by the Spirit of life. You're not just returning to what you were. You're becoming what you were always meant to be. You're not just recovering. You're discovering aspects of yourself that could only emerge through the specific process you've walked. You're not just healing. You're becoming whole in ways that were previously impossible. The community of belonging. You're not meant to walk this journey alone. Divine design includes community, connection, mutual support, and shared purpose. The isolation you've experienced was never the end goal. It was preparation for healthier, more authentic relationships with people who can see and celebrate who you really are, rather than who they need you to be. There are people ahead of you who will recognize what you carry before you fully understand it yourself. There are relationships being prepared that will call forth gifts you forgot you had, encourage dreams you thought were dead, and support visions you're afraid to voice. There are communities forming that will provide the support, encouragement, accountability, and celebration you need for this next phase of your journey. These aren't relationships you'll have to force or manufacture. They'll emerge naturally as you step into alignment with your restored identity and renewed purpose. The right people will be drawn to what's authentic in you, and you'll be drawn to what's authentic in them. There will be a recognition, a resonance, a sense of coming home that you haven't felt in far too long. These relationships will be characterized by mutual respect, genuine love, honest communication, and shared commitment to growth and truth. You won't have to perform in these relationships or maintain a facade of having it all together. You'll be free to be human, to have bad days, to ask for help, to admit when you're struggling. You'll find people who love you not in spite of your imperfections, but because of the beautiful way you carry them. These relationships will provide a safe space for you to continue growing, healing, and becoming. They'll challenge you to be your best self while accepting you exactly as you are. They'll speak truth in love, offer grace in failure, and celebrate progress in all its forms. The legacy of hidden faithfulness. Every moment of faithfulness in the hidden places has been recorded, treasured, and honored in the heavenly realm. Every act of love when no one was watching, every prayer when no one was listening, every choice to trust when circumstances suggested doubt, every decision to serve when service went unrecognized, all of it matters, all of it counts. All of it contributes to the legacy you're building that extends far beyond what you can see or measure. Your influence extends in ripples that continue expanding long after the initial impact. The people you've touched through kindness, the prayers you've prayed that have moved heaven, the love you've shared that has changed hearts. These create ongoing effects that continue working in lives and situations even when you're not aware of their impact. You may never know this side of eternity, how many lives have been changed by your hidden acts of faithfulness. You may never see the full extent of how your prayers have influenced circumstances, how your presence has brought peace to chaotic situations, how your words have planted seeds that grew into life-changing revelations. The divine keeps perfect records. Nothing is forgotten, nothing is wasted, nothing is overlooked. Your tears have been collected in bottles. Your sacrifices have been noted in books. Your perseverance has been celebrated in books. Your perseverance has been celebrated in books. Your celebration has been celebrated in books. The investment you've made in invisible things, character, integrity, faithfulness, love. These are the treasures that don't rust or fade or lose their value. They compound with interest in the spiritual realm, growing more valuable with time rather than depreciating. They form the foundation upon which everything else in your life will be built, the bedrock that will support whatever God constructs through you in the seasons ahead. Your hidden faithfulness has created a reservoir of spiritual authority that others will recognize, even when they can't articulate what they're sensing. There's something about people who have been faithful in small things, who have maintained their integrity when no one was watching, who have chosen love when it cost them something. They carry an atmosphere of authenticity that can't be faked or manufactured, the promise of continued growth. This season of restoration isn't the end of your story. It's the beginning of a new chapter that promises to be more fulfilling, more impactful, and more aligned with your true identity than anything you've experienced before. You're not being returned to who you were. You're being launched into who you're becoming. The best is not behind you. It's ahead of you, waiting to be discovered, explored, and embraced with wonder and anticipation. Your capacity for love is still expanding. The pain you've processed has increased your ability to empathize with others who are hurting. The healing you've received has equipped you to offer genuine hope to those who are still in dark places. The restoration you've experienced has prepared you to guide others through their own seasons of rebuilding. Your ability to trust is still deepening. Every time God has proven faithful in your life, He has increased your capacity to believe Him for bigger things, to rest in His promises during uncertain times, to anchor your hope in His character rather than your circumstance. Your understanding of grace is still increasing. The more you've needed mercy, the more grateful you've become for it. The more you've received forgiveness, the more freely you've been able to extend it to others. The more you've experienced unconditional love, the more naturally you've begun to offer it without keeping score or demanding reciprocity. Your effectiveness in serving others is still developing. The skills you've gained through struggle, the wisdom you've acquired through pain, the patience you've learned through waiting, these are all tools in your toolkit that will serve you well as you move into new opportunities to impact lives and influence circumstances. The wisdom you've gained through struggle is now available for deployment in situations that require exactly the kind of insight that only comes through personal experience. The compassion you've developed through pain is ready to be shared with others who are walking similar paths. The strength you've discovered through weakness is prepared to be demonstrated in arenas where others need to see that it's possible to overcome. You haven't reached your ceiling. You're just getting started. The foundation has been laid during the hidden years, and now it's time to build something beautiful upon it. The roots have grown deep during the quiet seasons, and now they're ready to support fruit that will nourish many. Living from overflow. The days of living from empty are over. The season of giving from depletion has ended. The time of serving from exhaustion has passed. You're being invited into a new way of being, one where you live, love, and serve from overflow rather than obligation, from abundance rather than scarcity, from joy rather than duty. This overflow isn't based on having everything figured out or having all your needs perfectly met. It's based on knowing you're connected to an infinite source of love, strength, wisdom, and grace. When you're plugged into that source through intimate relationship, consistent communion, and surrendered trust, you don't run out. When you're rooted in that reality through daily practice and persistent faith, you don't burn out. Your acts of service will now flow from joy rather than duty. When you help others, it will be because love compels you, not because guilt drives you. When you say yes to opportunities, it will be because you sense divine leading, not because you're afraid to disappoint people. Your expressions of love will emerge from abundance rather than anxiety. You'll give because you have something to give, not because you're trying to earn something in return. You'll serve because you're grateful for what you've received, not because you're trying to prove your worth. Your responses to others' needs will come from strength rather than struggle. You'll be able to offer solid support because you're standing on solid ground. You'll be able to provide genuine encouragement because you're genuinely encouraged. You'll be able to speak hope because you're living in hope. This doesn't mean life will be without challenges or that you'll never face difficult circumstances again. It means you'll face them from a different posture, not as someone who's barely surviving, but as someone who knows they're beloved, equipped, and accompanied by divine presence through every situation. The invitation to step forward. This message isn't just meant to comfort you, it's meant to commission you. You're not being called to passivity but to movement, not to hiding but to emergence, not to safety but to courage, not to withdrawal but to engagement, with renewed purpose and restored confidence. There are steps waiting to be taken that will require faith, but not fear. There are words waiting to be spoken that will bring life, but may also bring resistance. There are connections waiting to be made that will expand your influence and increase your impact. There are risks waiting to be embraced that will stretch your trust, but also enlarge your territory. The restoration of your identity and the renewal of your purpose are meant to result in re-engagement with your calling and renewed participation in divine purpose. God hasn't been healing you just so you can feel better, though He certainly wants that. He's been restoring you so you can step forward with confidence into the assignments He has prepared for you. You don't have to have all the answers before you begin. You don't need to see the entire staircase to take the first step. You don't have to understand every detail of the plan to move forward in obedience to the next clear instruction. You simply need to trust that the same voice calling you forward is the same voice that has been sustaining you all along. The courage you need for the next step will come as you take it. The wisdom you need for future decisions will be provided when you need it. The strength you need for upcoming challenges will be available when you face them. Divine provision follows divine direction, and divine direction comes to those who are listening and willing to respond. The restoration of dreams. Remember those dreams you carried, the ones that seemed so vivid and urgent and possible before life got complicated, before disappointment dulled their colors, before practical concerns pushed them to the back burner of your consciousness? They're not as dead as you thought they were. Some dreams were meant for a different season of your life, and it's healthy to release them with gratitude for what they taught you about yourself and God. But others were planted by divine intention and are simply waiting for the right soil conditions to sprout again. The difference between a dead dream and a dormant dream is that dormant dreams respond to the right environment, the proper timing, and renewed faith. During your season of restoration, God has been preparing not just you, but also the circumstances that will allow certain dreams to find new expression. He's been arranging resources, positioning people, and creating opportunities that will align with the mature version of those early visions. The dreams that are returning won't look exactly like they did before. They've been refined by your experiences, informed by your growth, and adapted to fit who you've become rather than who you used to be. Pay attention to what stirs your heart again. Notice what captures your imagination during quiet moments. Listen for the whispers of possibility that slip through the cracks of your carefully constructed, realistic expectations. God is breathing on things that were dormant, watering seeds that were planted long ago, and preparing to surprise you with new growth in areas where you thought nothing would ever bloom again. The healing of relationship. Not every relationship from your past needs to be restored, but some of them do. There are people who walked away during your difficult season not because they stopped loving you, but because they didn't know how to handle your pain, your questions, your struggle. There are others who misunderstood your silence, your withdrawal, your need for space to process and heal. As you step into this new season of restoration and renewed identity, some of those relationships may be ready for reconnection. Not all of them. Wisdom will help you discern which bridges are worth rebuilding and which are better left as memories you honor but don't attempt to recreate. The relationships that are restored will be different than they were before. They'll be built on a foundation of greater authenticity, deeper understanding, and more realistic expectations. You won't pretend to be who you used to be, and hopefully they won't expect you to. There will also be new relationships that emerge as you step into this new season, people who can appreciate the person you've become through struggle, who can value the wisdom you've gained through pain, who can celebrate the strength you've developed through weakness. These new relationships will often feel easier, more natural, more life-giving than some of the relationships from your past. They'll be based on who you are now rather than who you used to be, on what you can offer from your current place of wholeness rather than what you could provide from your previous place of performance. The multiplication of impact. One of the beautiful mysteries of God's economy is how He takes what seems small and makes it significant. How He takes what appears ordinary and makes it extraordinary. How He takes what looks like failure and transforms it into a foundation for greater success than was previously possible. Your season of hiddenness, pain, and restoration hasn't reduced your potential impact. It has prepared you for multiplication of impact in ways you couldn't have imagined before. The depth you've gained through suffering, the wisdom you've acquired through confusion, the compassion you've developed through personal pain, these qualify you to touch lives at levels that weren't accessible before. People who have been broken and healed carry a different kind of authority than those who have always been whole. They speak to the wounded with credibility that can only come from personal experience, They offer hope that sounds authentic because it's been tested in the furnace of their own despair. Your testimony will carry weight because it's not theoretical. Your encouragement will be powerful because it's rooted in reality rather than optimism. Your prayers will be effective because they flow from a heart that understands both divine faithfulness and human frailty. The platforms God provides for you in this new season may not be the same ones you occupied before, but they'll be perfectly suited for the message you now carry and the people you're called to reach. Some may be larger than what you had before, others may be smaller but more targeted. The size of the platform is less important than the alignment between your message and your audience, between your gift and the need it meets, the integration of all things. God is a master at integration. He doesn't waste experiences, even painful ones. He doesn't discard lessons, even costly ones. He doesn't overlook growth, even when it happens in hidden places. Everything you've been through is being woven together into a tapestry of purpose that will astound you with its beauty and surprise you with its complexity. The skills you developed in previous seasons won't be discarded. They'll be enhanced and redirected. The relationships you built in former roles won't be forgotten. They'll serve as bridges to new opportunities. The knowledge you gain through various experiences won't be obsolete. It will provide wisdom for navigating new challenges. Even the pain you've endured will serve a purpose. It has developed in you a capacity for empathy that will make you more effective in ministry. It has taught you about human frailty in ways that will make you more patient with others' weaknesses. It has shown you the depths of God's faithfulness in ways that will make your testimony unshakable. The waiting you've done will make you more appreciative of movement when it comes. The silence you've endured will make you more grateful for conversation when it's offered. The loneliness you've experienced will make you more committed to authentic community when it's found. Nothing has been wasted. Everything has been preparation. All of it will serve the purposes God has in mind for this new season of your life, the celebration of heaven. As you read these words, as these truths penetrate your heart, as this reality begins to shift your perspective and adjust your expectations, know that heaven is celebrating not just your understanding, but your existence, not just your restoration, but your response, not just your healing, but your wholeness. The angels who have been assigned to your life have been waiting for this moment when you remember who you are and whose you are. They've been witnessing your struggle, documenting your faithfulness, and anticipating your breakthrough. Your restoration is an answer to prayers they've been offering on your behalf. The divine isn't just pleased with your progress, he's delighted with your presence. He's not just satisfied with your service, he's thrilled with your soul. He's not just approving of your actions, he's applauding your very being. You bring joy to the heart of God simply by being yourself. Not the polished version, not the perfect version, but the authentic version that struggles and questions and doubts and hopes and loves and tries again. Your willingness to keep walking with Him through confusion brings Him more pleasure than the spiritual performance of those who have never questioned or struggled. Your sacred assignment. You still belong here, not just in the general sense that all people have value and deserve respect, but in the specific sense that you have a unique role to play, a distinctive contribution to make. a particular light to shine that no one else can provide in quite the same way. Your voice is needed in conversations that haven't happened yet. There are words you will speak that will unlock someone's understanding, ease someone's pain, or ignite someone's hope. Your presence is required in rooms you haven't entered yet. There are atmospheres you will change simply by walking in with faith, love, and divine presence flowing through you. Your influence is anticipated in lives you haven't touched yet. There are people God is preparing to cross your path who need exactly what you carry, not what you used to carry, but what you carry now, after having been broken and healed, tested and refined, confused and clarified. Your love is expected in places that haven't experienced it yet. There are environments that are waiting for the kind of authentic care that flows from someone who has received grace and learned to extend it freely to others. The world is waiting for what you carry. Not the exhausted version of you that has been trying to keep up with impossible expectations, but the restored version that knows its worth, understands its calling, and walks in the confidence of divine love and purpose. The path forward. Moving forward from this place doesn't require perfection. It requires presence. It doesn't demand that you have everything figured out. It asks that you stay connected to the one who does. It doesn't need you to be impressive. It needs you to be authentic. It doesn't call for flawless performance. It calls for faithful response to divine direction. Your next steps will be illuminated one at a time. You don't need floodlight clarity. You just need enough light for the next step. Your path will be revealed as you walk it with trust and obedience. Your purpose will unfold as you embrace it with faith and courage. You don't need to see the entire journey to begin walking in the right direction. Trust the process that has brought you this far. Trust the timing that has orchestrated every detail of your story. Trust the voice that has been speaking to you through these words and will continue speaking to you through His Word, His Spirit, and His people. Trust that the same love that has carried you through the valley of shadow and death will continue carrying you forward into green pastures and beside still waters. Trust that the same grace that sustained you in weakness will empower you in strength. Trust that the same faithfulness that held you when you couldn't hold yourself will establish you as you take new steps of faith. The new sound of your soul. Listen carefully. Can you hear it? There's a new sound emerging from the depths of your being. It's not the sound of striving or struggling or trying to prove yourself. It's not the noise of anxiety or the clamor of desperation. It's the sound of someone who knows they belong, who understands they're loved, who recognizes they're equipped for whatever lies ahead. It's the sound of peace that doesn't depend on circumstances. It's the melody of joy that doesn't require external validation. It's the harmony of hope that doesn't need human confirmation. It's the rhythm of rest that trusts divine timing. It's the song of a soul that has found its place in the cosmic symphony. This new sound will attract the right people and repel the wrong ones. It will open doors that are meant to be opened and keep closed ones that need to remain shut. It will create opportunities that align with your authentic self and eliminate obligations that drain your energy without purpose. People will sense something different about you without being able to articulate exactly what has changed. They'll feel more peace in your presence, more hope in your company, more faith after conversations with you. They'll recognize that you've been somewhere and learned something that they need to understand. The ripple effect. Your restoration will have effects that extend far beyond your personal experience. As you step into wholeness, you give others permission to heal. As you embrace your authentic identity, you encourage others to stop pretending. As you walk in divine purpose, you inspire others to seek their own calling. The people in your life have been watching your journey, even when you thought no one was paying attention. They've observed how you've handled disappointment, processed pain, and persevered through difficulty. Your response to struggle has been a testimony to them about the reality of faith, the power of grace, and the possibility of restoration. Now they'll witness something even more powerful: your emergence from brokenness into wholeness, your transition from questioning to confidence, your movement from hiding to shining. This will impact them profoundly, giving them hope for their own healing and courage for their own calling. Your children, if you have them, will benefit from having a parent who has walked through darkness and emerged with light intact. Your friends will be blessed by your renewed perspective and restored passion. Your community will be enriched by your authentic presence and genuine contribution. The eternal perspective. From heaven's viewpoint, this season of your life has never been a detour or delay. It has been development. What looked like waste from Earth's perspective has been investment from eternity's standpoint. What felt like punishment has been preparation. What appeared to be abandonment has been advancement toward divine purposes that required exactly this kind of processing. The pain you've endured has not been meaningless suffering. It has been meaningful sacrifice that has purchased wisdom, compassion, and authority that couldn't be obtained any other way. The waiting you've done has not been wasted time. It has been needed preparation for opportunities that required maturity you didn't previously possess. The questions you've wrestled with have not been evidence of weak faith. They have been signs of maturing faith that refuses to accept easy answers to complex realities. The struggles you've faced have not been punishment for past mistakes. They have been preparation for future ministry that will require credibility that only comes through personal experience. From eternity's perspective, everything has been working together for good. Not just your good, but the good of everyone whose life you will touch with the grace, wisdom, and hope you've received through your own process of breaking and healing. Your sacred place, you still belong here. You always have. The question was never whether you belonged, it was whether you would remember, accept, and live from that belonging. The doubt was never about your place in God's heart. It was about your willingness to trust His love when circumstances seemed to contradict it. Now you know, not just intellectually, but experientially, not just theoretically, but practically. You know you are loved, chosen, equipped, and commissioned. You know you have purpose, calling, and divine assignment. You know you belong not as a visitor or guest, but as family, as beloved, as essential. This knowing will change everything. How you walk into rooms, how you respond to criticism, how you handle rejection, how you process disappointment, how you view yourself, how you treat others, how you make decisions, how you spend your time, how you invest your energy. You belong here, in this time, in this place, in this moment, in this season, in this assignment, in this calling, in this purpose. You belong in God's heart, in His plans, in His kingdom, in His story. You belong with His people, in His presence, under His protection, within His purposes. Welcome home. Welcome back to yourself. Welcome back to your place. Welcome back to your voice. Welcome back to your voice. Welcome back to your belonging. The world has been waiting for you, and now you're here, not as you were, but as you've become. Not with what you used to carry, but with what you carry now. Not with your former strength, but with your current grace. Not with your past authority, but with your present authenticity. You still belong here. You always will. And now you're ready to live like it.